Hang on. Okay, once again, this is Eve Rickert with Thornapple Press, and I'm here with Nillin Lore to discuss their new book, Carry On. And once again, okay, it says that we're live on Instagram. There we go.
Okay.
Instagram is always tricky with the software that I'm using, but I think it's working now, which may be the first successful Thornapple Press Live we've ever done through the Thornapple Instagram channel. So we are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. If you're watching us, you can comment wherever you are, and we will see your comments. So feel free to say hi, feel free to ask questions, and we'll answer them on the stream. But yeah, first I want to acknowledge that I am fortunate enough to be joining from the traditional unceded territories of the Lekwungen and Osainich peoples, otherwise known as Victoria, BC. And I'm delighted to be here discussing this book with you. Nillin, would you like to introduce yourself and then say something about your book?
Yeah, so my name is Nillin Lore, and I'm a queer, non-binary, polyamorous, disabled author and educator here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada, which is actually Treaty 6 territory in homeland of the Métis Nation. And yeah, I'm really stoked about Carry On. It's been really cool. I've been doing some cool tour stuff with it, so that's been very fun. Yeah.
Great. And for those watching, I just want to mention that this is Nillin's second book. So I also have their first book here, which came out in 2025, How Do I Sexy? A Guide for Trans and Non-Binary Queers. And I think they look beautiful together.
They really do. They really complement each other, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I was really pleased with how the cover came out. It was a bit of a process, as you recall. So
it was, yeah.
And all these little neat things. Like I just noticed here that the flowers are a rainbow.
Yeah. When Fen was working on it, they were like, they were so focused on the flowers and making it really come together like that. So
yeah, they're beautiful. So yeah, this book is just so, like, there's so much in here. It's so meaty for, a book that doesn't seem too big, and lots to talk about in here potentially. But this is an introduction to the book for people just finding out about it. So first, let's start pretty high level. And I remember when we were working on the subtitle and the description for this book, we wanted to be really clear that this was about internalized transphobic and queerphobic baggage. So this is a book for queer and trans people to unpack the stuff that they have internalized from the broader culture about themselves and people like them, or ourselves and people like us. And but so it's not targeted for allies to deal with their own baggage. And that's something we've been seeing some confusion on already. Some people even seem, despite how we've tried to target it, some people almost seem offended that this book is not for them. But do you want to say more about that and what internalized queerphobic and transphobic baggage means and why we needed a book specifically for queer and trans people?
Yeah, I mean, like, just based upon what we're even talking about here with like people being a little upset, it's not more educational for them and things like that, and that it's not to help them unpack, their internalized transphobia and queerphobia in terms of being like an ally. A lot of our community has to do that work for people all the time throughout the rest of the year. We're constantly educating and trying to inform and advocating for ourselves and for our community kind of incessantly year round. And with doing all that work of basically just trying to survive, keep our homes, carve out space, support each other, there's not a lot of room or time to like reflect inwardly. You're putting so much effort on the world around you and so much effort on just trying to survive in these times that are decidedly increasingly transphobic and queerphobic and violent. but like, you know, I really wanted to put a book out there that just reminded everybody that doing that internal work was really, really important, and that like they owed it to themselves in a lot of ways, because when we're out there, we're hearing all that like intense negativity, and you know, and it's not just coming from, you know, individuals. It's not just coming from politicians and teachers and neighbors and friends and comedians and so on and so forth, but it's also coming from our literal governments, and it's coming from religions, and it's coming from cultures, and it's coming from music and film and television and so on and so forth. Um, that it's really hard to completely to not let some of that negativity sink in, and really affect you, right? And so it can even crop in a little small ways. Like I'd even argue that a lot of cases of people even just feeling dysphoria in general, can be a symptom of that internalization, if that dysphoria is being experienced because of not meeting these expectations that they put on themselves, um, um, from external stimuli, you know, from like what it's supposed to be a trans person, or what it's supposed to be a man, or what it's supposed to be a woman. Um, so yeah, you know, like it's just taking the time to like make sure that you're looking after yourself is just really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, what are some signs that somebody needs this book?
Oh man, there's so many. I would definitely say some of the ones for me,
Mm-hmm.
tend to be things like a lot of self-doubt, second guessing myself, spiraling, um, if you're feeling stressed leaving your home, if you're losing sleep, if you're doom scrolling is a really big one. Or I generally find too, if I'm feeling, um, a lot of fear or frustration at myself, which I seem like two separate things, but like can be quite related. All these sorts of things can be kind of those little internal, like I guess triggers or like warning signs. And you know, it can be very outwardly, like, you know, if you're realizing that you're looking at other queer and trans people and you're feeling a lot of like bitterness or anger or frustration about that, with how they're expressing themselves or what they have that you don't have, that can be a sign of something. Making queerphobic jokes, being afraid, to hold hands with your partner in public. There's some the degree of what can be a sign of it is really large, because
Mm-hmm.
we alter things about ourselves and we alter our line of thinking, and we can kind of like not only regress, but like, closet ourselves, or get kind of angry at those around us and closet, them as well too. I remember there was a while there when I first came out that like I didn't want to be out with my partner at the time, so we had to kind of keep that under wraps. But to the point where I would even be anxious going out with friends. Like I'd almost have this need to like, let's all just dial it down a little bit because we're in public right now. We got to be careful, and that can all be signs of internalization. Yeah.
So, that seems like a complicated question, because in some
It
ways
is.
that's also, you know, I want to be safe, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to be, and I mean, I know this is not the same thing, but as a non-monogamous person,
Yeah.
I have had partners who've really struggled with being out in public,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's like, you know, I'm afraid of consequences. I'm afraid that it will
Yeah.
harm me or someone I love if someone knows I'm non-monogamous. But very often it's been just shame, you know,
Yes.
or either their shame or a partner's shame. And so do you offer tools for how people can sort of tease those things apart, like the need for safety versus the, you know, undoing the conditioning that might be preventing you from living authentically in the ways you can?
I think one of the yeah, and one of the biggest tools that they can really try to do is even just to separate those two things as best as they can, right? Is like
Mm,
there's the need for safety is one thing, and that can be internalized, and some of the actions that you take can be a result of internalization. But the shame is kind of that's that is a very good word to actually use that I talk about quite a bit in the book as well too. Like shame is a very kind of like it's related, but it's a different thing, right? Because if you're at home and you still feel that shame when there's not maybe necessarily like a risk to your safety, then what does that
mm,
mean, right? It's to say, why am I still feeling this when I'm someplace by myself, or I'm someplace with safe people, but I still have that shame, I still have that guilt, I still have that, like, you know, frustration or whatever it might be. And so, you know, when it comes to like, one of the things I often remember a lot is like when I was first coming out as trans femme, I had a lot of internalization about my facial hair and about body hair specifically. It was a form of like, it was a source of dysphoria for sure, but it was also like a big degree of like, no matter how much I shaved or how close I got it, I could still see the stubble. And I always felt that that betrayed something about myself and made me feel that I was failing at what I was doing and it was wrong and it was gross. And like, these were all things that were going through my head at the time, to the point where like I would stop wearing dresses entirely. I'd argue with myself, are you even trans? Can your body even do this? And I would like, wear baggy clothes. Even at home, though, is the thing too. Not just when I went out in public, but I just at home was almost punishing myself for not meeting an expectation or meeting a goal that really came from a place of transphobia, because of these beliefs that like in order to be trans you had to transition, you had to pass, you had to look in very specific sort of ways as being feminine. And as far as my brain was telling me, women and femmes did not have stubble, they did not have beards, they did not have facial hair. And if I did, then I could not be femme, I could not be a woman, I could not be trans.
Yeah.
You know, so when it comes to tools, they're like really one of the biggest things I always talk about. I feel that I spend a good amount of time on in the book specifically, is that internalization can work the other way too. So if all the most important thing I feel is your environment and the information that you're receiving, or what you're taking in, right? So if you're finding that like all of the information that you're getting is very, very, very negative about being trans and queer and stuff like that, and that internalization, that information you're getting is making you feel increasingly bleak and in despair and depressed and all those sorts of horrible feelings, that might be a sign that it's time to change the information you're receiving. And we have a lot more control over that than we think that we do. Sure, there can be issues at home with, you know, if you're living with your parents or if you're living with other people that are around you that are homophobic, that can be really, you know, difficult, right? Because you're in a space where you can't really necessarily control what other people are doing, but you can control, you know, what you're willing to like, you know, take in or what you're willing to put up with, right? And so one of the biggest things I always say when it comes to like challenging those sorts of messages is replace them. The best thing you can do is watch queer and trans media that's positive, read more books by queer and trans people, watch YouTube reels, listen to music, look at art, lean into community. You don't even have to necessarily leave your house for these things. But the more that you're seeing that like, wait, these aspects of myself are things that can be celebrated and bring me joy, all of a sudden that messaging starts to have less of an impact, versus you go home and it's immediately Facebook, Trump, MAGA, you know, all these reasons why we're not allowed to have sports and be in sports, and all these reasons why we're a danger to families and communities, versus, oh, wait a second, we have our own families and communities. We're great athletes. We're amazing creators. Look at all this beautiful stuff that we do as a community. Both of those are going to make you feel very different about yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So, as I mentioned, you know, this is your second book. And what made you decide, well, actually, I can't remember if it was you who decided that this should be your next book or if it was we who decided.
I think it was you, because I pitched you like three,
Okay.
and this was one you're like, let's do this one. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I actually want to, I'm kind of curious about your journey as a writer, because, you know, we worked with you quite a lot on this book, and Andrea was a finalist for an editorial award for their work on it. And then, you know, you did this book with Andrea. You're either doing or you just did another book with Jessica Kingsley, the furry book. Is that written yet? Or
Yeah, that'll be coming up relatively soon. Yeah,
Okay.
within the next couple years. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then
so
we
like,
have another book slated with you, which is the Arrow book, which I'm super excited about. Can't come soon enough. So how has that been? How do you feel like you've grown as a writer How has that been for you? Is there anything you want to say about that process?
I mean, I feel like I've grown like so much, especially when I remember the experiences of How Do I Sexy, because we went through a lot of rounds of editing for that one. I had never written a book before by myself. And so like I remember there were certain points in time when I was even feeling almost like why did I even bother doing this? Like I like we this is a round of editing like 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever. Like, man, I'm a terrible writer. So I was getting a lot of that like horrible like internal messaging. And there were even some times that like I was just like, I hate you, Andrea. But like but like realizing that like Andrew's
Everybody
not
thinks that about their editor at some point.
exactly right.
Yeah.
When I even met them in Toronto, I was just like, you jerk. Like gave each other hugs. Thank you for helping. Like there were so many points in time when I was wondering like, what the hell am I doing? Why did I think I could do this? But by the end of it, like the amount that I had learned about just even like sentence structure and like composition and tone and how it all went together. When I went to do Carry On, honestly, I felt it was like a significantly easier process because I knew going into it where I needed to focus in terms of like, making sure that I'm not all over the place and that like my concepts are flowing logically and making more sense. And so I think we still I don't remember how many rounds of edits we ended up doing for Carry On. It definitely feels like less. Um, and when Carry On came out, like when it was done, I felt really proud of it. Like I was really, really happy with it. I felt like it was very tight. It addressed exactly what it said it was going to. I covered everything about that I was really happy to do. I was able to include diverse voices. I was able to address even some things that maybe like I'm not an expert on, but I was able to bring in other experts to talk about ableism and talk about racism and talk about like generational trauma and their cultures. And these were all things that in retrospect, I wish I could have done maybe a little bit better in How Do I Sexy. But now going even into Arrow, like again, I with Arrow, I sat down and I did this huge mind map of like, here's going to be the whole flow. This is the narrative that I'm telling. This is the message that I'm leading towards. These are the voices that I want to invite to help me get there as well too. Here are the other books that I need to read. And it's funny too because like at the end of each book before it comes out, I usually have a moment of like thinking to myself like, I am never going to write again. That was awful. And then within a day, I'm
know
like,
the feeling.
hey, Eve, so I had an idea. And there's my next pitch. So yeah, it's I feel like, and I know that I wouldn't have had this opportunity necessarily with other publishers. Like Thornapple is really unique in that sense. I even knew that like, sorry, my partner's giving me her hands. Love you. That's Finn. They designed my book cover.
Oh, hello.
So yeah, like it's been an incredible experience. And if you had like a camera in my house, you'd see the times I flipped my table. You'd see the times I sat on YouTube for 4 days when I should have been writing. It's a huge process, but I genuinely feel like I've grown exponentially. And actually found like I love it. I love that it drives me nuts. I love that it's frustrating. I love that it's scary. I love all these things because really when it comes down to it, when I go to those book events and I'm talking to people and they're thanking me for the book and they're talking about their experiences and I'm having all these interactions with people I never would have met before, going to Guelph and Ingersoll. I never even heard of Ingersoll. And there was like 15, 20 people there. And somebody gave me a ride back from, like Toronto afterwards. And it's been amazing. It's been really, really cool. Yeah. I think that answered the question.
Yeah, definitely.
I have ADHD, so there we go.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned how tight it was. Like I said, it's just very, very dense. You cover a lot in a fairly short space. I have 2 questions. One is, what's your favorite part of the book? And the other is, what was the hardest part of the book?
Interesting. So my favorite part of the book actually is all the things that I got away with. So, like making a joke about like Star Wars erotica in the book at one point in time. I make a joke about like Jedi Masters Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, like fanfic and stuff like that. So I love all the Nillinisms that are in there. But I also really, really, really love that I got to honestly talk to some people that I've long admired and really looked up to, and was able to have like more intimate conversations with them that I never would have been able to have otherwise if I wasn't like writing Carry On, like talking to like John Brady McDonald, and talking to Bucket the Puppy Clown and Bushra Ahmed, and Anuha, like all these different people that like I see winning awards and writing books, and I see on CBC News, and I see in the bookstore, and I think, oh, that's such a cool person, and getting to actually like speak to them as peers and as humans and learn from them, was just like that. That was my favorite part of the whole thing. Was kind of almost the other voices I brought in. As much as I'm very proud of what I've done with it. I'm very proud of my own writing, but like personally, my favorite part was the other people and what they brought to it. Even getting to go to Toronto and like hang out with Andrew Gurza and stuff like that. Like I've seen Andrew Gurza on media for like a decade. I've been following Andrew Gurza. Never would have thought that he'd write my foreword, let alone that I'd be hanging out in Toronto, like doing a reading with him. But incredible, like really, really cool. What was the second part? I forget.
The second part was, what was the hardest part of the book to write?
Whew. I think the hardest part was again the boundary setting section, because boundaries and like consent and communication, like it can be so nuanced, and it can be really personal, and I still struggle with doing it myself, right? It's like I can give advice to people about like don't put up with certain sorts of behavior, but I put up with certain sorts of behavior all the time too. So there was like this weird degree of like almost feeling like a bit of like a liar or something about it, sort of thing. It's just like, I say to like, don't interact with your transphobic uncle because he's transphobic, but like it's setting boundaries and deciding where your lines and your limits are, is and communicating those things effectively in a way that's respectful and that's honoring yourself, and not lashing out and things. That's a really hard skill to develop, and it's one that even when you're really good at it, you've been doing it for a long time, you can still mess up, right? You can still not look out for yourself in a way that you should have, cross somebody else's boundary, violate consent. You can be the most consensual person in the world and still mess up on boundaries and on expressing them and stuff like that, in different ways, because we're human. So that whole section I just found was challenging, was kind of difficult. So yeah, there's just there's a lot.
I can really relate to the sort of the imposter syndrome of of writing a how-to, right? Where it's like, I'm writing about this stuff that I know I struggle with constantly. But what I tell myself is, if you're naturally good at something, you don't think about how to do it. It's only when you've really had to work at it and learn about it that you can like explain it, because you've had to learn it and explain it to yourself and practice it. So I think that people who either have had to acquire those skills or are still acquiring them are good people to explain how to do them.
Yes.
So that's what I tell myself anyway. So
I agree. I agree 100%. I'm on board.
Yeah. So I want to pick out one section of this book to talk about. And I think that this is one that is probably going to be of interest to a lot of people, just because it's something we talk about all the time. And it's the chapter on lateral violence. And I was kind of surprised when I saw that, but also like that makes a lot of sense. But can you talk a little bit about lateral violence and how internalized queer and transphobia plays into that, and how it shows up in communities and relationships and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, internalization and just a lot of the guilt and the shame and the fear and stuff that some of us carry, or a lot of us carry, because of, external messaging, and because of transphobia and queerphobia from the rest of society. It really, sadly, unfortunately, naturally carries in with us into these spaces, right? I think that, I don't want to say like the whole like hurt people thing, because that's not really necessarily what we're talking about here. It's more along the lines of like, it's almost like when you get little scraps of like acceptance, and you get little bits of like growth and progress, it can be scary when that feels threatened, and sometimes that can feel threatened by other people doing things differently, right? And I think that a lot of the issue with internalization, with lateral violence in general, is a mix of our own like learned behaviors that we're still actively unlearning, our own internalization, and how we're projecting that onto other people, maybe knowingly, maybe even unknowingly, as well as like this fear of like protecting ourselves and what we have, right? And one of the biggest things that I always see that with is, especially in trans community spaces, is how many times I've heard another trans person say, well, I'm not that kind of trans, right? Like, I'm not that sort of trans person. Or like, the degree of separation even between like drag and the trans community, and the butting of heads there and stuff like that, right? So when I was thinking about like lateral violence specifically, I felt like a lot of lateral violence, again, comes from what we've learned and what we've grown under, right? It's just like, we can be queer and trans and stuff like that, but if you grow up in Alberta and you're surrounded by like, an extremely conservative, very, very, very like traditional minded family, then even if you go into safe community spaces, chances are you've probably been raised with degrees of racism and ableism, and that does follow you into it, right? And so whether it's just going outwardly to others, or it's coming from a space of like how we're feeling about ourselves, it kind of differs from person to person. But I find that like in a lot of cases too, that like when I was struggling with internalization, I was projecting my anger and my frustration on others around me as well too, because I couldn't be that, right? Or I couldn't accomplish that, or there was some sort of perception in my mind of like, I'm turning 40 this year. I stopped HRT. It wasn't quite working out for me. On top of it, I'm told every single day I'm too fat, I'm too hairy. I'm never going to be like, trans or transition and in the non-binary way that I want to. And on one hand, I can take that and believe that, and then be very bitter and angry at everyone around me who looks like I want to look. Like, look at that adorable femboy. Look at that beautiful trans girl. Look at all these amazing gender diverse people who are young and fit and smooth, and they look awesome, and they're punk rock, and I look like this. I can be really bitter and angry about that and project that outwardly, because of these beliefs that I've internalized, that I'm not trans enough, I'm not cool enough, I'm not attractive enough. When, you know what? Why don't I just instead embrace my weird, non-binary, bear, grandma core aesthetic, and let's go and see what 40-year-old non-binary Nillin looks like, right? Lateral violence can end up like being that thing that is an outward like lash on this sense of weird sort of like failure, even maybe a little bit like, and then of course blatant prejudice even just kind of comes in general, right? No matter how good you are of a person, chances are you've picked up something along the way from comedy films, from parents, from grandparents, or whatever that you're bringing with you, and we all owe it to each other to be mindful of that, and to be educating ourselves on that, and holding ourselves accountable for it. No matter how much I truly deeply wish I was perfect and non-ableist and everything, even with all my own disabilities and stuff like that, I still find myself every now and then, because of growing up in the era of South Park, the R slur pops up all the time in my head, all the time. Like, oh, that's so R slur. I heard that every day as a kid, all the time. Everything bad was R slur. Everything bad was gay. Everything bad was whatever, right? So it's like we have to like unlearn that sort of stuff and realize that like, yeah, it's still there even at 40. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is one key takeaway that you want people to get from this book? Like, what would you like for people to leave this, if they remember one thing, or like leave the book feeling one thing, what would you want
So
them
I
to do?
think, right. So this is really interesting as a question for me, because I don't know if my answer would be the same if you asked me in 2019. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, since Trump was elected, the first time, the second time, whatever, I feel like in 2026, what I really want people to take away from this is that it's okay to just survive, and it's okay to just, like, there's a lot going on. There's a lot that we can be doing, that we should be doing for ourselves and for each other. But it's also okay to bubble. There's no problem with bubbling, honestly. Like, there's so much hatred out there. It's okay to stay on the platforms that don't make you feel absolutely horrible or suicidal or whatever. You're allowed to want to be surrounded by things that you like. You're allowed to want to be
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by joy and love and community, and you're allowed to not want a constant stream of war and genocide and depression and death and turmoil and hatred. Um, and it's okay to, like, unplug from that and interact with that in your own way. Um, so, I think the biggest thing that I really wish that I knew even beforehand was that, like, the world is going to world around you. But, like, you can affect a lot in your life and in your community, even if you're just keeping it in a small little space. Because here's the thing: everyone that's around you in your immediate like space, your partners, your friends, your family, your community, even if you're bubbled with them, they're also bubbled with more, and they're also bubbled with more. So the joy that you're cultivating, the work that you're doing on yourself, that you're sharing with them, that they're seeing you do, that's affecting them too, and that's affecting who they're around there too. So there's a lot more power that you realize, and also just, like, not having to be on the grand scale of things, and realizing that, like, internalization is something that you can change. They are narratives that you can rewrite, and you can still internalize things on a positive note. Like, it's literally going into a filter and then being processed inside, in terms of that information, how you're processing it and applying it to you and your external world. So you do have a lot more like impact on that messaging, to, like, say nope, and then writing and allowing in what you want to allow in. So I just think that, like, I just want all my queer trans communities and friends and people out there to just unplug sometimes. Go watch Heartstopper, read
Mm-hmm.
some cool trans comics. Like, it's okay to take a break. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've mentioned your upcoming projects a little bit,
Yeah.
but let's hear more about those. You
Okay.
have 2 books in the hopper right now, so
Yeah.
um,
So
tell
I'm
us
I'm
about.
I'm gonna boast about Arrow first, because that's one for
Mhm.
Thornapple, and, like, and I'm really 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 psyched about Arrow. It's become much more of, like, almost like an investigative piece, which I kind of
Nice.
love, because I'm approaching it with a sense of humor as well too, and I
Mhm.
hope that really comes across in the book. But I'm kind of leaning into the investigative quality, like, almost as if, like, a narrative tool,
Okay.
because really, like, I still don't know what romantic love is supposed to be. I'm still trying to figure that out as I'm actively writing the book, because, once again, like, it's all about chemicals and experiences and perspectives and shared agreements and dynamics, and I've talked to romance authors, filmmakers, musicians, and poets, and every single person, Eve, is giving me a different freaking answer. What's love?
Mhm.
I don't know.
Have
We got to figure this out.
have you read or have you interviewed Carrie Jenkins?
They're on my list, actually. She's on my
Okay.
list, so I have her book.
Yeah.
Um,
She's got
uh,
at least 3.
yeah, and I think it's the one with all the little hearts on it, the red one.
That's What Love Is. Yeah, that's the one that came to mind.
Yeah,
She also wrote Sad Love, which is just one of my favorite books ever. So I highly
that was a
recommend
good
that
one
one.
too. Yeah,
But for your book as research, What Love Is was the one I was thinking of for sure.
yeah. So I haven't read it quite yet, and
Mhm.
she's also on my list of people that I wanted to, like, send an email to have an actual conversation as well too. So,
Mhm.
because I don't, if I can help it, I like quoting it is good, but, like, having the conversation is good
Mhm.
too. But I
She
am really
gave a
looking forward. Was that?
Oh, she gave what I thought was a brilliant explanation or like sort of soundbite about that romantic love was what did she call it? Something she said something like ancient biological machinery in modern social clothing or something like that. So,
Yeah,
or no, it was fulfilling ancient biological machinery fulfilling a modern social role.
I kind of love that.
And
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
that's her thesis of what love is.
Yeah, and so I'd love to hear like more about that and how that even translates in the context of like aromanticism, people that like
Mhm.
are not feeling those same sort of um chemical or biological or even maybe
Mhm.
like social experiences, and like so like what
Yeah.
does that mean, and like and how does that translate in terms of their quote unquote ability, or even just like experiences with like relationships and stuff like that. And I mean, one of the things I really hope that this book does is that it shows a lot of people that it's okay if your experiences with romance and with like intimacy in general um, don't look like they do, in the movies, or how they're described in a poem, or
Mhm.
how they're listed in a painting. It's okay, and that doesn't necessarily even mean that like those relationships or connections are less than or not
Mhm.
romantic or not serious enough. As well as just like you're not broken in any way, shape, or form. Like
Mhm.
that's not a thing. I
Yeah.
remember I talk about it in the book quite a bit at the beginning too, like how often I would hear people like earlier on of like, I just want you to feel something. I feel like you don't love me as much as I love you. Um, the things that I had heard from exes. And I remember at the time getting really frustrated and hurt by that and sad by that, going like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what
Mhm.
is, so I would overcompensate, or I would try to do something else and nothing seemed to work. But something about how I was experiencing or expressing myself
Mhm.
didn't seem, I guess, real enough to them. So I was, so what is this? But yeah, so like that book, there's still work to be done on it, and I think I still have about 4 or 5 months until I have to send you your
Mhm.
draft there.
Mhm.
But I'm really actually like quite excited about it and enjoying it. And again, I'm getting to talk to people that like, I have a list of some that haven't responded yet. I really want to talk to Chuck Tingle because love is real. I really want to talk to Travis Baldry because Legends and Lattes and stuff.
Mhm.
Who knows who I'm going to be able to interview ultimately, but it's going to be really cool. I think that's going to be really neat.
Great.
And then yeah, the furries one, that's also kind of still a little bit early, but like the furry community has been growing massively huge. It's getting bigger and bigger every year.
Mhm.
I'm going to cons in Edmonton at Furry, Calgary for Calfurry. I think next year I'm going to Vancouver. And I'm even part of my local community here. I put on Fur Meets Out Saskatoon. And I also am one of the board of director members for the Lethbridge community in southern Alberta, helping them kind of get set up with like a nonprofit and stuff like that. And it's just fascinating that the community is so big, almost everywhere, and that it's also like extremely neurodivergent,
Mhm.
and very, very, very queer and trans. And I think that says a lot again because you got these weird niche kind of outlier communities that like they find each other and they interact. And so the idea with the Personas book is kind of twofold. It's like one, I want to just give you kind of like a snapshot of like 2020s, or even like from the past to the 2020s. Here's how it looks, not just in Canada but in South America, in the UK, in Japan, in Korea, in France, so on and so forth, because there's furries all over the place. And I've been talking to as many of them as I can. But on top of it, like a look at like what is it about the community and what is it about furries that seems to draw so many neurodivergent and queer and trans and black and indigenous and disabled and just so many people that are diverse to this community in particular. And it's also been really interesting and fascinating to me that the more that I'm looking into the furry history, the more that I'm actually seeing how furries like were all the way back to like Stonewall, and like they were
Mhm.
part, like there were furries friggin' in the Stonewall riots in the
Oh
like
wow,
early.
I had no idea.
Neither did I.
Wow.
And then you look even further back, and you're talking, if we're thinking anthropomorphism, then you're talking about like ancient Greece. You're talking about
Mhm.
Egyptian. You're talking about like all sorts of different cultural aspects of just anthropomorphic life and stuff like that, and what that representation meant in
Mhm.
various cultures. So again, I have to be careful though, because this is the type of book that I could probably write a tome, right?
Mhm.
And not, I gotta focus it on
Yeah.
The neurodivergent and the queer stuff more. So even as I'm talking about it here, I'm like, okay, rein it in, focus. And as you know, like that was one of the things I struggled with How Do I Sexy at first, was like there was so much I wanted to talk about. Some of it was veering off topic, so I'm still learning how to do that. Yeah. But both books very, very cool. Oh, and I guess non-monogamy and queer inclusivity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's coming out this fall too.
That's coming out this fall, so it's good that I remember my third book.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have mentioned that one as well. So
it's okay.
Yeah, we've been so focused on this one.
Yeah.
So is there anything that I haven't asked that you wish I'd asked, or anything that you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I think that was pretty good. I'm just, I'm really enjoying myself. I'm really enjoying writing. As long as Thornapple will have me, I probably currently have a document for like a book a year, up until about 2032. So, so as long as long as you'll have me, I'll keep pitching the ideas and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, great. And where can people find you?
So the best place to find me currently is Instagram, because I'm really hanging out with the furries there. I'm Nillin Lore on Instagram. But I can also be found on Blue Sky, as well as I'm on like a couple of other little smaller apps, like what was it? It's called Howl or something like that. But those would be the two main ones. I'm not on Facebook, and I'm absolutely not on X. So if you see any profiles like that on those platforms, those ain't me. But I'd say the two best are probably Blue Sky and Instagram, as well as just going to my website, nillinlore.ca. That's where I post about all my kind of like readings or workshops or events that I'm hosting. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And again, the book is Carry On, Unpacking Your Internalized, Transphobic, and Queerphobic Baggage. And if you go to our website, thornapplepress.ca, and go to our books, it's there, and there's all kinds of links to order it, but you can order it anywhere you buy books. Your local bookstore is our favorite. Our site has some referral links to places like bookshop.org, which also supports independent bookstores. Yeah. So, Nillin, are there any questions that you have for me before we wrap this up?
I don't think so. No. Yeah. Yeah. Communication has been great. So.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much. And thanks to those who joined and watched. And I'm looking forward to your next manuscript.
Yay.
Yay. Bye. Good to see you.
Bye.